right. How's everyone doing? We're going to do 2 solo episodes this week. We had some nagging audio issues, and I didn't want to put out something where we're having issues again because it's really annoying to listen to. We're going to get it all worked out. I think we're going to build up our systems a little better. And Bill is working out of a temporary living situation, so it's kind of rough to get something solid and built up on his end. But anyway, thanks for your patience. So there's going to be some overlaps since we're posting 2 of these solo episodes this week, like at least on one topic. So you'll get Bill's take on it too. So it'd be interesting. So we'll kind of get right into it then. So we did get some. The first thing was there's been some comments. I think we just had the Pan Am no-gis, and there were some people talking about, at least, and there's probably more examples of this, but like Michael Pixley and Helena Krevar, winning the purple belt divisions, and like, hey, are they sandbagging or not? And, we, as far as their ability, I mean, I think no one would argue, for Michael Pixley at ADCC and Helena as well. They're certainly not your average purple belts. But remember, PANS was an IBJJF rule set, and there are some IBJJF does have requirements for time and belt. Now, I don't know all the details, like how long, Helena, I think, is only 17 years old, so she could have only been a purple belt so long under the IBJJF system. So there's a restriction there that, is keeping her at purple belt for that system anyway. Michael Pixley, I have no idea how long he's been a purple belt. Now, I could understand if someone was, kind of holding out at purple belt for 4 or 5 years at that level of, technique, and, that would, I think then the sandbagging thing would be a little more, I guess it'd be more of a good, it'd be a good argument for sandbagging if I can get my words out today. So, but again, we had this guy who was at ADCC that had an incredible showing, so I think he's certainly much higher level than most of your purple belts, that are competing. So I don't know. It's a tough situation just because of the rule set under IBJJF and how you're promoted and minimum time and belt. So I don't really have much more to say about that. I understand when people see these high-level ADCC competitors coming in and just mopping the floor with the other purple belts. I understand, but just keep in mind the rule sets for each one. So, like when we compete at Revolution here locally in Seattle, we do have belts in our gi as far as the competitors, but our no-gi is divided up into advanced, kind of novice, beginner, that type of thing, where I think that helps a little more with this whole sandbagging issue, especially with no-gi. So anyway, I don't really have much more to say about that. I'm sure Bill will really expand upon that and give some controversial takes, as he always does. But more on stuff I really like to talk about. We had some questions come in, and I'll put on my glasses so I can actually read them. So one of them was a really brief kind of question that said, hey, do you know about any TRT clinics or physicians in California? I do not. We've talked about this before, and I think you can go to the Institute of Functional Medicine as one resource, and they have a find a practitioner, so you can kind of put in your zip code and kind of look around. Again, my personal bias is really be under the care of a physician that you actually see, once a year at least, when you're doing this stuff. I mean, there's lots of these TRT clinics, quote unquote, that, these video-based things that I don't know the quality of care, and really looking under the hood, just finding someone to give you TRT is only the first part of it. The second part is, there's, I can tell you from my wife's experience in her practice, I mean, not every patient's the same. And some people react differently. Some people need their doses, not just the dose itself, but how frequently they take it. And there's a little fine tuning that needs to come into play. And also following up with your laboratory stuff is really important to have someone that knows what they're doing with that. So if you are looking into that, find someone that you can actually go see at least once. And then certainly the follow-ups you could do over video or something like that would make a lot more sense to me. But go to that website and see if you can find someone that is good in your area for that. All right. So Bill kind of gave me some information about one of his training partners down in Arizona, a brown belt with what he says is a first metacarpal injury. So the metacarpal are the kind of the long bones of the hand. And I guess, any gripping with any intensity or strength causes pain. So what should this person do? So first of all, before I could give a really good answer to that, I'd actually need to examine them and really see if, is what we think is going on really going on? Sometimes the site of pain can lead us astray a little bit. There could be something upstream or downstream causing a painful condition that's not necessarily at the location. What I'd recommend, if it's been going on for any length of time, especially if you're, kind of a brown belt, you've been doing it for a while, I would first get checked out by someone that knows what the heck they're doing. I would go see a hand specialist to get a good diagnosis first, to see what you're dealing with. And then, depending on what that is, you could do something like, you could get a referral to hand therapy. You have to work, they have certified hand therapists that's pretty much all they do. And they're really, really good. Most of them are excellent, and they can really not only make you feel better, but actually give you some preventive stuff too that you can, especially with a grip intensive sport like ours. Of course, there's other things. One of the general things we always talk about kind of as a preventive for hands in general, because we do so much gripping, and it's involving flexion of all these muscles and tendons here in the hand. And if you think about what we do so much grip, we rarely extend and go back the other way. And so one could argue pretty convincingly that most of us have these significant muscle imbalances where we have a way, either tight forearms, which basically that's where all your digit muscles are, kind of curling your hands in, and it's hard to even open your hands sometimes, especially if you're playing a lot of spider guard and stuff like that. The muscles involved with opening the fingers are usually way underdeveloped in people. And I'm not saying they should be equal to your gripping motion, because they'll never be. But I think we have such a huge imbalance between the two. And when you have huge imbalances across a joint, it causes problems with the joint itself. So one of the things we like to do, you can buy these at Amazon, or you can just get a rubber band. The cool thing about these little bands here, they have different strengths. Like the one I'm looking at now says heavy, and it comes with a set that goes from light to medium. And you just wrap them around your fingers and just try to open them and hold them isometrically. So, do some holds, like 10-second holds, and relax. And you can put these on like during the workday or whenever you have a couple free minutes while you're doing other things to kind of work those extensors. And that can help some too, to help correct some of the imbalances. But as far as fixing your injury, if it is indeed a metacarpal injury, I would definitely go, especially if you want to be practicing this art for any length of time, get a good diagnosis and get a good treatment plan for that. And then, there's other ancillary stuff. Once you have a diagnosis, maybe you're in with a good hand therapist, there's other things you can do also, like the red light, near infrared for inflammation. And again, I talked about the hand exercises. Yeah, and if you have any further questions on that stuff, send it in to us. Again, Bill just, it's kind of a secondhand question he sent to me. So next, again, we're kind of blowing through this pretty quickly. We're going to keep it fairly short today, but we had a listener question. This guy's in his late 30s. He says he's an advanced belt that has been taking it easy for the last few months, but now they're looking to ramp up intensity with their sparring and are having a lot of issues with the cardio. And I'm just kind of reading this question. Sorry if I'm not getting all the information, but it says some of it is nerves, just knowing they're going to try hard. But the question is, are there any supplements or nutritional advice or general advice for someone starting to ramp up like this? Their goal is to have 2 hard sparring days a week. Okay. Late 30s, again, as we talk about many times with this issue, especially as you age, you really have to pay attention to all the sources of stress in your life. I know we've talked about this so many times on this podcast. That whole allostatic load, aka the stress cup, go back almost to the beginning of this podcast and some of the videos. We did a whole episode about this, where you really have to pay attention to the total amounts of stressors in your life day to day when you're planning your training, especially with jiu-jitsu or any kind of grappling. As we start to age, again, I can train 3 days a week, but even that I'm not doing every day hard sparring. Maybe one or two. But things like sleep, which is huge. If you're not sleeping well, nothing's going to go well. It just isn't. You just increased a huge amount of stress in your day-to-day allostatic load, aka stress cup. And as you age, that cup gets smaller and smaller, for what you can tolerate on a day-to-day basis. So if you're adding a hard sparring round in on a day of bad sleep, your nervous system is really not able to tolerate it much. And you're going to feel gassed early, just not going to be a good rolls for you if you're trying to elevate the intensity. So you got to be aware of that. And like I said, we've talked about this a bunch on how to kind of things you can monitor day to day to kind of see where you're at with that. But let's say that all things being equal, you have your sleep dialed in okay, you don't have a lot of stressors going on at work or at home, and you're metabolically healthy. Let's assume, you're not diabetic or, grossly overweight. So there certainly are things you can do. So nutritionally, number one, what I would say is, and this is what I follow kind of like this works for me, may not work for everyone else, but what I find does work for a lot of people is kind of a cyclic low carb thing. And a lot of people go on low carb and they lose a lot of weight and they feel pretty good about that. But you got to be really careful with it when you're practicing jiu-jitsu or any kind of high-intensity sport. We need carbohydrate for that. You're not always just burning fat. You need to be able to tap into that muscle glycogen in there for your more intense parts of your rolls. So what I like to do, my non-training days, I keep it pretty clean, where I just do kind of protein, a good source of fat, and maybe some fiber with it, and some like fermented food or something. Very little starchy type of carbohydrates or sugars. But then let's say like I'm training tonight. Tonight is going to be a big amount of protein, and that's when I'm going to refeed my starch, because you got to refeed that muscle glycogen or you'll go into kind of a stress response and you'll end up crashing and burning. When we're doing what we call any kind of anaerobic or glycolytic type of training, where we're burning sugar under those high intensity sessions. So we need to replete that lost muscle glycogen. It's really important we do that. And it works really well. You can kind of maintain some leanness. You can get the benefits of kind of a lower carbohydrate on your non-training days, and then you need to get that refeed. That's really important to do that, the meal after your training session, okay, especially if you're on a hard roll, especially too. Number two with the kind of the nutritional thing is repleting your hydration. That is super important, because without that, your nervous system is going to try to shut down a bit, and you're going to definitely feel it. You're not going to recover as well, and you're not going to be up for more intense rolls at your next training session. So again, you can, there's plenty of electrolyte recipes you can do, but I just did a whole thing, must have been a couple months ago, a little brief solo episode on hydration and the importance of electrolytes And, people were so scared of salt, basically. And so I wanted to kind of put a little context into that. So definitely listen to that. But that's number 2. So we got the carb refeed. And now we want to make sure you're hydrated really, really well, especially, a guy like me. I'm known to sweat a whole lot, and I can tell when I don't replete my hydration well. I just don't feel well. So that's the second thing you can do. Now, supplements are just that. They're supplements, okay? They're not your primary part like your nutrition, your sleep, and your hydration. But there are some things that we did an episode about some things that actually can help. I think creatine is a good one. It's been really well studied, very, very safe. Most people do about 5 grams per day. I certainly do it, not only for the training benefits, but as I'm older, I'm 55 in a month. And so there's some research showing some cognitive benefits of creatine as well, too, as we age, especially. So creatine's a good one. There's beta-alanine we've talked about before. If you can deal with the itchy kind of skin flushing that happens with it, that's pretty well studied. There are cordyceps mushroom. That's pretty good for helping athletic performance, especially sustained cardiovascular efforts. One I've been playing with recently, which is kind of interesting, is trimethylglycine, otherwise known as betaine. You can try that as well too. If you start adding this stuff, do it one at a time, because some people can have like, hey, that didn't really agree with me. And then if you're doing it all at once, you don't know which one it is. So when I start a new supplement, I always just do that for a couple days to make sure, if that's a problem, I'll know it, as opposed to starting like 3 supplements at once. If you're aging, late 30s, not so much, but when you start getting to late 40s, and especially in the mid 50s, like myself, we've talked about methylene blue. As long as you're not taking like an SSRI, like antidepressant, there can be some interactions with that you got to be careful of. But methylene blue has been really game changing for me personally. It's really rescuing my aging mitochondria, basically. And that's where we're generating all the energy required for any kind of, certainly day-to-day effort, but especially when we start pushing the envelope with our cardio. I found that extremely effective for me. Now, if you're younger and you start taking it, you may not, if your mitochondria are still doing well and they're not failing, like all of us will to an extent, especially when we get into our 50s. You may not see much of a benefit. Just remember as long as you're not taking SSRIs, the antidepressants, it's pretty darn safe. But know that you're going to have like a blue-green P when so some people that's a little alarming. It's usually not a problem though. Again, none of this is medical advice. I have to say that because I'm a physician, so I'm just giving you some information, what I've done. Another thing that I've especially helping me recover a little more, even the following day after my training, along with my hydration, I'll add some branched chain amino acids into my hydration drink. That seems to help the anabolic response, especially as we get older. It's harder and harder to hit that anabolic switch. So some of the branched chain amino acids, especially leucine, seems to do that the best. So that's a good one you can do as well too. But again, these are all supplements, and they're called supplements for a reason, because they shouldn't be your in other words, supplements aren't going to rescue you if you have poor hydration, your nutrition isn't on point, and especially your sleep isn't good. So it's really important that you get those dialed in first, and then you can optimize with the supplements. It's really important. Some general health things I like to do. I get a high quality multivitamin that has, methylated B complex in it. That helps support the energy systems pretty well. All these, especially as we age, it's really important, especially we're doing something as demanding as jiu-jitsu, to have this stuff all on point and optimize as much as possible. Those are kind of there's more out there that people have studied. We've talked about them in previous podcasts, but those are kind of the ones that I use right now. I don't necessarily use beta-alanine, but I am using cordyceps, methylene blue, the trimethylglycine. So I've been playing around with that, and I've had pretty darn good luck with that. I know I was going through a time where, I really wasn't. I was expecting the same out of my body that I'd done in my 30s, and that just wasn't happening. Even though I had my sleep and my stress pretty well dialed in, and the nutrition was good. So that's when the supplements really started helping me, especially the ones that were trying to rescue the mitochondria a little bit, the methylene blue especially. And I've also noticed a bump, the cordyceps and trimethylglycine even more. So I've gotten to a point now where, just training on Saturday, after class, I had 7 rolls, and, I would say 4 of them were pretty darn tough. And before I was just wiped after 2 or 3. So it's been pretty profound for me. And so then, there's all the other things you can do for recovery, but we don't need to go delve into all that stuff again. Since you were talking about something to really support your cardio, I guess, recovery does too, of course, but a direct support. I think those things we just talked about. And really, I don't think 2 days a week of hard rolling is unreasonable for someone in their late 30s, as long as you get everything else kind of balanced. But as you go, especially mid 50s and things like that, you really want to watch how you're feeling day to day. If you're feeling a little like, gosh, man, it's a struggle to get to class, your brain's trying to tell you something. It's not being lazy. That's one of the signs of overtraining, is when you're kind of losing interest in something you really love and are passionate about. Not losing interest, but, you're like, the motivation isn't there that day. You should really listen to that. And then, if you do go into class, really back off on those days, because it's not going to help you. As a matter of fact, it's just going to hurt you by just trying to push through that. There's a time to develop mental toughness, which is great, but know when to do that. When you're feeling good, go for it. Just having an intuitive sense about your body, and really especially with training, and because you may have a plan like, oh gosh, I'm training tomorrow night. I got a plan to roll hard, and I'm really motivated to do so. And then you wake up that morning of training, and gosh, you didn't sleep that well, and you're not feeling so hot. Don't be afraid to just say, okay, fine, I'm going to change my plan, and that's fine. That's going to help you in the long run. So anyway, I don't want to beat that to death too much, but in general, I can't say it enough how important it is, if you want to continue in this martial art for the long term, is to approach it that way, and not these little short-term sprints. Have a good training plan long term. Really, don't be afraid to take a break for a while. It looks like you did that for a bit, and you're trying to ramp up. And by the way, I can be gone for 2 weeks. Let's say I was on a vacation or something, and I think most of us will tell you, just coming back on the mats, there's that jiu-jitsu cardio, man, that seems to go away pretty quick. So, I will be, or if I'm recovering from, let's say I was sick with a respiratory infection, that takes several weeks to get that back. And so that's part of it too, just coming back into it. Give yourself a break, and, you're going to have to build that machinery back up. It's just the way it is. The body is super adaptable, and it's going to spend its resources when it's needed. And the only way it knows on when it needs something is by your inputs day to day. So if you've been backed off for several months, we don't need to have those adaptations. But but just give yourself a little time too. So that's the other piece of it as well. So at any rate, hey, again, we're going to keep this pretty brief, under half an hour today for me, because Bill's going to put out something which I'm sure will be much more wordy, as he always is. So please send all your questions to us here, Grappling with Podcast. And just to tease a little bit, I'm going to get mine and Bill's professor back on here so he and I can kind of do an episode, because he's got a lot of really good stuff to share. So if you guys have any questions for a very experienced 4th degree black belt, great coach, fantastic instructor, and an awesome practitioner himself on the competitive level, start sending in some questions, because I'm going to have him on here real soon. So at any rate, I hope you guys have a great day. Thanks for bearing with us for our chronic technical issues here, and we'll see you soon. Take care, guys.